Welcome into Turning Point tonight, where together we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in with us. You know, one of the favorite things that I get to do is, I have this in my bio, is get to talk to people who don't know that they're conservatives yet, because I think everybody actually is a conservative, just the libs don't tend to know. And part of that is understanding how and why people move from the crazy woke left to the moderate left to the kind of down the middle of the left, more to the conservative side of the aisle. So today, we want to take a look at one of the leaders in the walk away movement. Natalie Jean Beisner is a former actress and also former Democrat who has taken a strong position on the conservative side of the aisle. Would love to dig into why that is, because I think it's important for everybody to know what are those triggers, if you, for lack of a better term, that get people over to the conservative side of the aisle. Natalie joins us today. Natalie, thanks so much for coming in and coming back. Really appreciate you doing so. I would love to start off like there. Well, first of all, how quote unquote far to the left were you? Were you a like crazy flaming hair lib, or were you a Democrat? Because I think those are two different things. And Bill Maher, I think, would agree with me. Where on the scale do you think you were?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I was a liberal. I wasn't, out burning things down with blue hair. But I am a two-time Obama voter and shamefully a Hillary Clinton voter. I donated to Planned Parenthood. I really was politically just completely uninformed, though. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was like, mostly apathetic, other than going every 4 years just to vote for the Democrat president, because I didn't know anything else on the ballot. So I wasn't a zealot by any means, but I would have proudly called myself a liberal.
Gotcha. So not necessarily into Crazyville, like lighting Teslas on fire, but it's definitely having the. So okay, so I guess how did you get there, right? Because people come up through there. I asked this, and I don't want to sound like I'm being rude or anything. I never had that. I never had this big transition moment. Growing up in sixth grade, I think this is probably my grandpa's doing, but have been a card carrying Republican / conservative for as long as I can remember. So how did you get from just kind of growing up to kind of into more liberal / progressive ideology policy wise?
I think that it is reflexive. I think that by default, especially I'm from Southern California. I live in Los Angeles currently. I'm a millennial, was an actress for a long time. So all of those things kind of make me more Democrat, I think, maybe than people in other parts of the country or maybe in other generations. I think that it takes work to be not a Democrat. Everything is kind of set up for you to be a liberal. I went to college, and that's like the path of least resistance. I mean, I never even questioned not being a liberal, even though I was raised Catholic and my parents actually aren't liberals. But it takes work to question and to become anything else. So it was, even though, again, I was politically apathetic, it was just like, I didn't even question, is there anything else I would be? I just took it as gospel truth that if you care about people and you care about women and you care about LGB, I mean, at the time it wasn't all the T and everything else, then you vote Democrat. And I consider myself a compassionate person. I had pronouns in my bio too. I have to make that. That's probably the craziest liberal thing I did.
You said something that I thought was really interesting, and I feel like I can't say enough that it kind of takes work to be a conservative. Conservatism requires nuance, whereas leftism or progressivism necessitates simplicity, because the second you start digging into the Black Lives Matter or whatever the other slogans are, my body, my choice, no one is illegal, any of the litany of things that they say, the second you start digging into it a little bit, it starts to break down. And the more you dig into it, you kind of can't help but kind of come over to the conservative side of the aisle. So what was that for you? What was like the aha moment? I know that probably wasn't like an immediate overnight thing. I would love to talk about Brandon Strzok, who I know you know and work with. He to me is expressed, this is like a aha moment. But did you have like this is it, I got to start looking into things, and it's all downhill or uphill, depending on the way you're looking at it from there?
I did actually have an aha moment, which came in summer of 2020. But going back a little bit further, because hindsight is 2020, and I realized that there were a couple things that planted a seed that didn't take fruit until 2020. So around 2016, 2017, even though I was a Trump hater, a Hillary voter, a liberal, I started noticing just I became aware of race for the first time, which sounds crazy now because it's everywhere. It seemed like, especially in theater, which is even more woke than Hollywood, if you can imagine it, and in
Yeah.
Hollywood, it was like race was everywhere all of a sudden. And I would see casting calls that specified non white actors for no reason whatsoever. And it became very apparent that especially theater companies were not interested in really telling my story as just another white woman, that it was really honing in on just one particular story. And I don't mind racial diversity obviously, but it was racial diversity above everything else, even at the expense of the story and the play and whatever else. And I also noticed the phrase white privilege for the first time. It felt like it was nowhere and then suddenly it was everywhere. And that phrase, even when I was still so deep in liberalism, it immediately did not sit right with me because it doesn't match my experience. I'm blessed in a lot of ways. I'm an American. I have two married parents who love me, a mother and a father, but none of the ways in which I'm blessed have to do with the color of my skin.
Mhm.
And I've come from a family that has struggled in a lot of ways, specifically financially. Again, very, very blessed, but I don't have privilege because of the color of my skin. And that really bothered me, and it was clear that no one really wanted to hear that and that you couldn't really say that. And so I kept quiet about it. It eventually was part of the reason, not the entire reason, but part of the reason why I left pursuing acting professionally, because it was just so much everywhere. But
Mhm.
it wasn't enough for me to leave the Democrat Party until 2020. And
Interesting.
when COVID came around, I lost both of my jobs overnight, like so many people. Never saw those jobs again. But I was nervous. I was scared because at the time, which maybe sounds crazy, I really did believe that the media could not lie to me. I believed what reporters and journalists said. And so I was afraid of COVID and I did everything that was asked of me. I stayed home. I only went out to the grocery store. I wore a mask in the grocery store. I actually had a grandmother die alone during that time, needlessly, not from COVID, but
Jeez.
just, she took her last breaths alone. I did it all. And then summer 2020 happened and George Floyd died. And we were all told, both implicitly and also explicitly, that we could go out and protest or riot or loot because that was happening in Los Angeles, but we still couldn't go to work and we still couldn't visit dying family members or, visit family members for the holidays. And that blew my mind. And that was the moment really where I realized that. Well, two things I realized. I realized the Democrat Party isn't for the little guy. I consider myself the little guy, someone who's paycheck to paycheck and is just trying to get by. And also, it was the first time that I was able to connect my suffering directly back to Democrat policies. And so I walked away from the Democrat Party because whenever I brought up this double standard and this hypocrisy to my liberal friends, which was all of my friends basically at the time, everyone I knew besides my parents were liberals, the only response I got, the only response, even from the people who liked me and knew me and loved me, was "You're selfish and you're racist." And that blew my mind because, first of all, the concerns that I had about the response to COVID touch any skin color. It's not a white person thing. It has nothing to
Mhm.
do with skin color. And it was very clear to me and to a lot of us kind of early on in this that most of us were going to survive COVID. But I didn't know if a lot of us were going to survive the response to COVID in terms
Yeah.
of finances and mental health and emotional stability, all the things that Democrats claim to care about. And it was like they refused to acknowledge that I might have any honest reason for disagreeing with them. And I saw this from people who I had known for years and who knew me to be a good person. And for them to call me racist over the response to the pandemic was, it felt like a punch in the gut. It felt like betrayal. And so obviously that wasn't one single moment, but that time in summer 2020, I mean, there was a point where we were under a nightly curfew due to the quote unquote peaceful protests on top of a lockdown that at that point had gone on for months and would continue on for many more months, although we didn't know that. And it just seemed like obviously that's not a good thing for my community, for my city, for my state. And I watched firsthand in late May, early June 2020 as these small independent businesses and restaurants, they had just barely been allowed to open in Los Angeles with
Hmm.
heavy restrictions, like 5 people at a time, masks, plastic dividers up to here. And then I watched them firsthand have to board up their windows, board up their doors, spray paint black owned business so that they wouldn't be looted. And again, it's just no matter what your skin color, like clearly this is not the way to go. And so
Yeah.
that was the moment that I realized the Democrat Party is not for me.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. And sorry to hear about your grandma. I know that was somewhere littered
Thank
in
you.
there. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's wild. We're talking to Natalie Jean Beisner. Natalie, I'd love for you to stick around after the break because I'm really curious about your thoughts as to how you change the minds of other progressives in the country. Because does it take another big thing to have be the catalyst, or can we do it in a more strategic way? She'll be right back after the break. So will we. Turning Point tonight. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. We'll see you then.